He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
Kia ora, just a heads up, this podcast contains kōrero around drug use and the effects of drug use, so it might not be suitable for younger listeners. Take care when listening.
Janay Harding is a highly skilled mixed martial arts artist from Aotearoa known for her dynamic striking, resilience and dedication. She has made a name for herself in promotions like Bellator MMA, earning respect as a fierce and determined competitor. Proudly representing her Māori and Pasifika whakapapa, Janay inspires aspiring athletes worldwide, embodying the values of hard work, discipline and passion in the sport.
Ko hakirimata te maunga, ko waikato te awa, ko tainui te waka, ko waikato te tōku iwi, no Naro Wahia ahau, ko Janay, tōku ngua.
Oh, the Waikato. I thought you were brought up in Christchurch.
I was. Whakapapa out to Naro Wahia, but my dad was actually whāngaid up to Tamaki Makaurau. So born in Christchurch, grew up in Christchurch till I was 10, and then, my dad was born in Ngaruawahia and then whāngaid out to Tamaki Makaurau around Papakura area. And
so you brought up in Christchurch, like we all know, Canterbury is an amazing place. What did that look like for you?
I've got 3 cousins on my uncle, my mum's brother's side, and 3 cousins on her sister's side. So there was 7 of us all the time. And my mum's sister's side, they're actually like half Rarotongan as well, in a sense, but they're very, very fair-skinned. So it was just me sort of sticking out like a sore thumb in a sense. But one of them especially is only a month apart from me, so she would be like the cousin that I'm closest with. And then, of course, just kind of coming up with them. There was 7 of us, so we Christchurch, small place, obviously moving around. You just like
what suburb are we hanging out in? Yeah,
mainly grew up in the Hawesville area. I went to Hawesville Primary School. And again, like probably only one of maybe, I want to say about 4 Māori kids that went, or even just Polynesian kids that went to Hawesville Primary. That's actually shut down since then. So it was since I was there, just because of all the earthquakes and stuff. So we definitely were around that area. I mean, there was a few other areas before I started school. We also went out to Akaroa quite a bit, just because there was one point when my grandma had a house up there. So I guess just being around that sort of area for the most part. And then at the age of 10, my mum had like a really good friend at the time that ended up moving over to Australia, and then about 2 other friends like in her close circle that moved to Australia. She went over and sort of just sussed it out and then just decided that that's where we were going to go. There's better opportunities for us, and she was a single parent, and I'm an only child. So
you were an only child.
Yeah.
Have you got only child syndrome?
I do and I don't. I've met a lot of other only children that I'm like, all right, y'all got it way too good. Cause like, I think it's different when you don't come from, that much in a sense. Like I'm spoiled, but maybe just more in the like affection and attention way rather than like the money way. Obviously, mum being a single parent, she was working a lot too. So that just meant, you could just end up being a little bit more independent because you're looking after yourself a little bit more than others.
So when your mother moved, your father stayed, or they split?
So they were never they kind of split before I was born. When we moved, maybe it was just under a year after we moved, he passed away.
What did your father die of?
This is like an interesting, and I actually don't think I've ever, maybe I did a story with Māori television a few years ago, but I don't think I've ever really disclosed it. But originally I got told when I was really young, I would have just turned 11 when he passed away, that it was like he had a heart defect that made his heart enlarged, which means it had to work obviously overtime a little bit to obviously pump blood to itself and then around his body. So he was always on medication and had a few issues with that. And so I guess I got told that he had like a stroke. But years later, when I finally connected with the birth whānau, they had just told me that the autopsy was a methamphetamine overdose. So yeah, it's sort of just like pretty like prevalent obviously in this country. And I think when I do tell people about it, that's sort of why I think a lot of the time people wonder why I am such such a personal, maybe not as much on my platforms and stuff, but a personal advocate for just what I plan on doing with my platforms and my experiences and stuff. And obviously drug and alcohol rehabilitation in this country, mainly meth, is something that I definitely just want to work on. I think there's like, from what I've seen in my experiences, there's a certain person that gravitates towards that, and it's usually those people that really struggle just to get a grip on things and struggle with integrating into like adulthood and figuring out life. And life is hard, don't get me wrong, and you just got all these like curveballs that get thrown at you, and some people just really don't make it through that river. And I think my dad was definitely one of them.
Do you think maybe it's because he was whangaid and he wasn't connected to his Māori side a little bit there?
We have so many theories, I guess, and a little bit of hearsay, because the other issue as well, he passed away on October 1st and I found out on November 31st. So he only has 2 kids. Then my brother obviously has a different mum who's also unfortunately passed away and at that time was still alive. And so the way my mum found out, she basically got a call from the welfare guy from New Zealand just being like, hey, we're going to close your case up, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, oh, he never plays welfare anyway. Like, what are you talking about, mate? Like, what's the big deal? And he was like, oh, do you not know Miss Harding? This poor dude till this day. I don't know, my brother.
My
like, I have
gosh.
no idea. That poor guy had to tell her on the spot, be like, oh, didn't you know, like Jeff's passed away? Yeah. I guess that was a bit sticky at the time. I also sort of attest that time and that relationship with my Māori side of me and my whakapapa to sort of why I didn't always push myself into my culture like I do. It's definitely not my mum's fault by any means. She was a massive advocate for me getting in touch with it, and you know, everyone finds it on their own and goes through their own journey with those kind of things with te reo Māori, or whether it's tikanga or whatever it is. And it took me a while. It took me a while to come around, and I do sort of think, you know, at the end of the day, the people that were responsible for raising me were definitely on my mum's side of the family, and my mum, 99 obviously % my mum, to be honest, and they were the people that were around me and that were there for me when I sort of saw fit. So going down that journey of understanding your dad passing away and it being months later to find out was obviously super devastating. And then just the politics of like land exchange, and I never got any of his stuff. Like, he was very talented musician in a lot of ways, just multifaceted in different instruments. I would have liked to get like a guitar or something, like a couple of photos, but yeah, it's hard to even to now, even up to a couple of years ago when I first sort of was starting to decide to move back. We made a trip back to New Zealand after COVID and stuff too, and that was sort of all open, and I had one of his friends reach out and sort of say, I've got some of his stuff here if you want like a photo. And that's like, 16 years later, I'm still getting bits and pieces and piecing the story together and figuring it out, but yeah, that's my journey, and I'm sort of like okay with it.
So you basically get on a plane, you go to Australia, your mum's like, you know what, we're going to make this work. And how does she do that? Because I know that, like, my mother was a factory worker and she's a tough woman, man. And I always admired her because she left school when she was 13 and she just went to work, and she just always a worker, always. My mother was just like, you can be whatever you want to be if you want to be.
That's why they did it as well, almost. Like, I think one thing, because my mum was the same, like, we moved over there. We honestly moved over to Australia with a couple of suitcases and a guitar. At the time, I still had the guitar. And obviously, I haven't played guitar in a long time. So I don't know how important it was then. But we shared a room in somebody else's house when we first moved over. And then we moved from Brisbane to the Gold Coast and did the exact same thing, moved into another family's house that we were close with. And when we first moved there, my mum worked in a factory, and then when we moved down to the Gold Coast, she worked at a car wash. She's a tough wahine for one, and she's just so culturally aware, one, and dealing with she's a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, like very light-skinned lady, so dealing with having a brown kid like myself that always got the, is she adopted, or, oh, that's your daughter, like, are you sure? On top of the like hardships that she was going through to just like, put food on the table for us and make a better lifestyle for us. Very predominantly white, like, and that was the group of people I was growing up with. So I didn't really know any different. I'm like, you're a kid, you don't really even understand the difference between races, and like, something's different, but you don't really understand it. Yeah. So you don't really get it. But obviously, and she's a staunch lady as well. Like, she's a no holds barred and like a no tolerance kind of lady as well. So even when it was like her own family, or like, we're changing changing the perspective of like a lot of people that are set in their ways. Like whenever I speak to people about Christchurch and what it's like, it is very old school mindset down there. Like it does sort of breed a culture of like we are set in our ways, and it's very, especially with all the political issues that are going on at the moment, it'd be very on the other side down there, I would assume, just because I grew up there and I know what it's like. You just kind of have to, be obviously open-minded, and being reactive isn't going to help anything either. But I know if it was my kid, I think I would be different. So my mum, obviously being my mum, I just can't imagine the amount of energy she would have had to spend on the times that I don't remember growing up on things like that, and having to navigate that in herself, and then on top of that figure it out for us and put food on the table and all the rest of it. I just don't even know how she did it.
Have you just started martial arts, have you?
I had started, I started karate when I was about 10 or 11, and then I moved over to MMA when I was 15, started fighting when I was 18. And it was sort of like after I finished high school, I was teasing the idea of university, but I just really wasn't, I was never an Australian citizen, so paying for the tuition and stuff was going to be a big thing, and then paying for a tuition that I was like, oh, am I really passionate about this? And it just so happens that that was communication. At the time, I wanted to do media and sports media.
You sound like Ruby Tui. When Ruby was 18, we had this exact conversation about, she's like, I think I want to go to media, communications and stuff like that. Now, I think she's gone back and done a little bit of study in it. She went to Canterbury and did a little bit. And this is what I think about anything, right? I'm a funny one. I'm just like, I think if you've got natural talent in something, it's just going to naturally evolve anyway, because you'll either hustle it or you'll try and find a way to get to it.
I knew I was kind of having like a unintentional gap year, I guess. I was making the decision of should I go to uni, blah, blah, blah. If I'm going to do it, I'll save up, etc., figure it out. And then I was at the gym and I was still training and just more as a hobby. And one guy just goes, are you doing this as a hobby or a career? And I was like, man, no one's ever asked me that. And that was at a time when it wasn't a career. It actually wasn't an available career. Maybe Max you could get on. This was at a time of Strikeforce, which is an old show that doesn't exist anymore. The owner of it was actually Scott Coker, who ended up owning Bellator and creating Bellator. So that's like a funny story in itself. When I started there, I didn't really know much about Bellator. I didn't really know women weren't in the UFC. Dana White was going around saying they'll never be in the UFC at that point.
Funny, eh?
I was just like,
360, brother.
Yeah, I was like, man, if I do fight, how is this gonna, how is this gonna make me money? How am I gonna be that star that I promised myself I was gonna be? But I was like, man, I love this sport and I love martial arts, so I guess maybe we'll just start at one fight and just figure it out as we went. And that's exactly sort of what happened. I nailed the first fight. I just smashed it.
So we're in MMA, but that's boxing as well, right? So you're doing both, or?
No, it's just MMA. That's what I started in, and I think a lot of people think I started in something else, but I started in MMA wholeheartedly. I end up sort of during the journey having a few boxing fights and having a few Muay Thai fights, and then obviously you just end up doing jiu-jitsu.
Taylor Harris?
Yeah.
Holy hit. I've watched some of her videos and she can hit.
She's a big girl.
Her reach is huge.
Athleticism. She's so athletic. In MMA, I fight at featherweight, which is 145 pounds, which is about 66 kilos. We fought at 73 kilos for the first fight.
Hold on, how heavy were you then?
I didn't have to cut weight, basically. That's all I say. I was walking around at probably that much, so I just kind of rocked up on the day. There wasn't a lot of fights as well available for me. I was only really doing the boxing fights just to stay active because I wasn't being able to find MMA fights. So it's a way to keep me active, keep me progressing, keep me honing in my skills and getting used to that competition environment without, having to find another MMA fighter, because the population and popularity of the sport back then was just nowhere near as much.
So what year are we looking at back then? Is it 2010, 15?
I want to say our first fight was probably 2018. And this was at a time as well that I had, like I said, I moved to Thailand. That was intended for 6 months, and then I ended up going from there to Scotland because my partner at the time was from Scotland. I was in talks with Bellator at the time, and I had just had the Contender Series opportunity fall through. So unfortunately, they hadn't really quite refined their visa process at the time. It wasn't their fault in a sense. It just
it's pain. So you can't get a what do they call it?
I was going for a P1.
Right. Oh, okay.
So and what's the term? It's like a unidentified alien, I'm pretty sure, or something like that.
You are a
typical American talk. Back in 2017, this was 2017.
Who was your coach?
I was training at Tiger Muay Thai at the time, so George Hickman was the head coach at the time. But the team wasn't cliquey as tight knit as what it is now at Bangtao.
for New Zealand fighters in the women's space, how do you go from that to UFC? How do you build, cross that bridge?
I think it looks different now than what it looked like when I did it. I would say people who came before me paved for me, and then I've paved for the people after. Back then, you had to travel to go find more girls to go fight, to then get the fights under your belt, to get the experience, to get seen. And you had to get a manager as well. I think that was really important because we didn't have that direct connection with the big promotions through the gym.
Is that an agent or a manager?
Like a fight manager.
Fight manager.
You can obviously get ones that cross over for the spot. They do both the branding side of things and the fight negotiation side of things. Especially like back then, understanding how to negotiate fighter pay. It's such a strange space to navigate. It isn't quite where it should be, but it is definitely increasing, getting better. It is a really young sport. Most of the time, you get like a show money and a win money.
What would that look like?
For the Contender Series was like $5,000 flat. Like you don't get a win and you don't get
you just get $5,000.
You just got $5,000.
But what if you won it?
You won it and hopefully you got a UFC contract, and that was meant to buffer out the rest of it.
How many people are in the crowd? Like, that's what bothers me, is if you've got people coming to watch you and you're getting $800 and the event is getting all these people.
Like, it wouldn't have been that much. It was a small venue. It was calling out a hotel, which is not a big venue. Maybe like a couple of thousand max. So probably not that much. It just was how it kind of went back then. The MMA wasn't anywhere near as popular, so you didn't have as many people buying streams and all that sort of stuff. So they weren't making the revenue that they are now, I would definitely say. Then maybe not too long after that, I fought again and I didn't get paid. So
what?
I was promised money, and then the guy did a runner.
So when is your next fight?
I don't have one. I had my last fight in September, and the last few years they've just been turbulent, and I've given a lot. I've given over obviously a decade to the sport, and I'm just sort of reevaluating my priorities, and fighting is going a little bit lower on the priorities. It's because of where it was. Like, I had my last fight with Bellator at the start of last year in February, fought in Dublin. I lost on a decision. A lot of people thought I didn't lose, especially like my coach Eugene, who I'm pretty sure he knows a few things about MMA. He's got a few world champions and stuff.
Yeah, just a few
under his belt. And so that was a bit of a salty feeling as well, because it was a rematch and I'd won the first fight as well.
How did you pay for all your travel and stuff?
Looking back, I honestly don't even really know. I mean, it's a bunch of different ways. So before I moved to Thailand, I was working like 3 different jobs and maybe like 60, 70 hours a week, just to save up as much as I possibly could. Maybe literally the week I had moved over there, they asked me if I want to fight in Hong Kong. So I fought in Hong Kong. I think I only got I want to say like 1,000 or 1,500. I think she tried to give me 1,000 and I was like, no, we agreed to $1,500.
So were you working and training at the same time?
Yeah. Edinburgh was a hard place for me to train. I think I just always, especially moving into this new chapter, just always attest my energy and my nature to attracting good people. One of my biggest things, obviously instilled by my mom, was just to be safe when I'm traveling. You're traveling by yourself for the most part.
So you look back on your career, and I know that you're present and things like that. Do you feel as though that you got there?
That's been like the co-pop of my last 10 months in my personal growth journey. I had a lot of things happen to me that were sort of out of my control, and I was making the best decision I could at the time with the information that I had. I have come to terms with it now that I do think I could have been a world champion for sure if a few things had aligned in a different way, and maybe I hadn't got off track in a few points of my journey, or I hadn't detached my retina, COVID hadn't hit. But I am also just so proud of myself. I've paved the way for a lot of girls coming through. I'm well known for being for the girls. I know that my energy has been well received so many times. I've made so many great connections. I've got so many cool people and a network that is international and spreads across the board. And I'm proud of those little moments. Not even just the Bellator stuff, but outside of that, I'm proud of doing amazing things with what I had. I don't think people really realize how hard it was back then to make it happen. And not come from much. I think until this day, a lot of people think I had sponsors and I had 2 wealthy parents or something like that, doing it, but I didn't. I just figured it out, and anyone can do that. And now with all of that accumulated knowledge of the lessons that I learned, I'm so proud to be the person I am today.
How do you tell young athletes, doesn't matter what you do, what are your sort of kōrero around that?
Back yourself. Number 1, kia kaha, just freaking back yourself. Maybe figure out at the beginning, which I do kind of credit my younger self to figuring out what my moral compass was, what my ethical standpoint was in a lot of things, and what my intentions were. My intentions were always to motivate women, empower women. Whether I was going to motivate them to be a fighter, it wasn't necessarily that. I just mean in a general sense. And then obviously representation, that was a important thing for me at the get-go. And then my moral compass and my ethical standpoints were definitely I don't want to align with brands that I don't genuinely believe in. I don't understand. I think that's maybe why I struggled to get sponsors, or I didn't have as many. Crazy.
So you're going to be an actor? Is this where this is going?
Sort of. I think that just gave me a taste where there's just a lot more money in that industry. If I stick to my niche, you know, I can definitely
Well, good looking and Māori.
Fighting was mainly what I was going to say.
Sorry.
But
Oh, my bad.
I can add those ones in. No. I was also coming up with like TikTok ideas. This was back when TikTok had just started, and that 916 idea was
So are you
crazy.
monetizing your social media now?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It has to be done for one, and something that I've always sort of aimed towards to do as a side hustle. Like I said, I didn't make any money for most of my career, and then obviously I went on big money when I was in Bellator, but I needed something else. So the boast thing was a side hustle. And then I connected with the agent, and then just since then I've just been self-taping for certain things, and some stuff works out, some stuff doesn't, for sure. I've done a lot of like lower end kind of level jobs, like more action extra or background or something like. So I'm happy to like pay my dues in that sense, just to learn the industry a little bit more. And I did a bunch of TVCs, and then last year, I self-taped for a request to self-tape for it when I had just fought in Dublin. I went to London, and then I flew to Bali. I self-taped for it in Bali, then got it. And I was like,
Traders?
For Colgate, sorry.
For Colgate?
Yeah. And I was like, oh shit, like I actually got it. They were filming the TVC in Vietnam, and then the stills were going to be in Bangkok, and they were casting it out of Australia. So this was through my Australian agent at the time. Went to Bali, Australia, turned around, went out to Vietnam, Bangkok.
Do you think being Māori is a huge advantage for anything that you want to do?
I think so. I think as well, just like, not just being Māori, but being like sort of not accepted by either side, like almost pushes me more. Like that motivated me more. That made me feel proud to be Māori. I've always been very outspoken about it in a sense. I've always only ever represented the Māori flag. We tried to put the Tino Rangatiratanga flag once. Being like this niche culture over there on a scene that was just, not really seen that much. And it was cool to represent Māori and give that brown girl representation across the board for Pacifica. Building that strength in myself through martial arts and through that journey. Obviously, that's exactly what I needed to build that. And then second of all, just knowing that I had that tika in me, like that came from somewhere that my mum didn't necessarily, instill in me. Like she wasn't like go scrap on the streets or something. I didn't come from a violent upbringing, there's nothing like that. Like, so that had to come from somewhere. And I just always say like that came from my Māori and my whakapapa, and knowing that I always had it in me. And then as the journey evolved, being like, oh, this makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, the connecting of the dots, right?
Yeah. I always wondered like certain traits about myself, why I like to hold a room together and bring people together and connect people. And manaakitanga was just something that I had. Kotahitanga was something that I loved and I gravitated towards, like all these like just general pillars that I have, just like my spirituality side. Like I never really understood why I was always so like into that.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been great.
Had so much fun.
Te Oho Ake is made with the support of Te Mātāwai with host Mere Baker and that kōrero with Janay Harding. Te Oho Ake was produced by Mere Baker and Awhina Kure of Era Vision Media.